Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Amy. Today, I'm talking to Ed Center. He is the founder of Village Well Parenting, a community where parents come to learn skills that nurture the parent-child relationship, heal intergenerational wounds, and discover the wisdom that allows parents to remain culturally grounded. Ed has spent his career supporting low-income, underrepresented youth and adults by helping them gain access to the resources necessary to thrive, working as a success strategist through youth programs, nonprofits, and schools. Ed is also the father of 2 children. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much. I'm also realizing that my bio is a mouthful, and so I'm going to go do some editing after that. That was challenging to say. Thank you.
It's very impressive. You're a professional who's worked with kids your entire career, and you also, have kids. You're also living the journey.
Living the dream and coaching other parents and educators about how to work with kids in a way that is connected and grounded. But can I share a story from this morning that may just completely undermine any credibility that I have with
Please
your audience?
do.
Okay. So I forgot that today was Veterans Day, right? It's actually tomorrow, but while we're recording, it's the substitute Veterans Day Friday. So my kid is off from school, my younger one, and he's 6 and he's home. We had a delightful morning. As I was coming here and doing a check to come onto the podcast, Google hit me with an update Chrome. And so I went into crazy, oh my God, what am I going to do? They're going to think I'm irresponsible. And then my kiddo comes in pissed off. I have no idea about what. And so while I'm trying to figure this out, he's about to throw a stuffed turtle at me. And I remember I coach parents for a living and I have techniques for this. And I turn to him and say, if you throw that, Christmas is canceled. Like, why did that come out of my mouth?
I hope I don't have to follow through on that one.
Good Lord. I can't follow through on that.
Right.
And so fortunately, he did not throw the turtle. He stormed off and slammed the door. And so my threat worked. This is not a best practice. This is not a recommendation. I have 12 ways to help us all, but also a good, other than just laughing at ourselves, laughing in the face of my poor fatherhood, that when we are triggered, right, we get seized with these fight, flight responses, in my case, fight, and a desire to threaten, dominate, scream, hit. And so that is the biggest work of parenting, is to learn to interrupt those triggers and those reactions. And I've gotten a lot better over the years, but in this situation, not so good. I give me C-.
I heard you on another podcast saying that it's when your kids act like jerks that we are the most likely to also start acting like jerks. Like, that's very eloquently put and true.
Correct. The double jerk syndrome.
And why does that happen? What's happening there?
So what happens, physiologically, right, is that when our kids act in a certain way, we misinterpret their behavior as a physical threat, right? And so our kid being disrespectful, talking back, stubborn, whatever the thing is, our amygdalas, our lizard brain, interprets that as a physical threat, and then sends all these hormones into our body that prepares us to fight or flee. Right. And so we get shallow breath, we get tensed, we get a shot of energy from our glycogen being converted into glucose, which is why our hands sometimes shake when we're mad or nervous. Right. So all of these things happen to prepare us to fight or flee. And so we then go into behaviors. And for me, that is threatening or yelling. For other people, that is hiding or numbing. And for other people, that is a desire to make everything perfect and please everybody to make the situation better. And those are trauma responses, right? And they're usually connected to behaviors that we had to shut down in our early childhood because of our parents, right? And so for me, when I was a kid, and I had great parents, and there was very little room for negotiation, self-advocacy, talking back, right? And so it was perceived as disrespect. And so when I would talk back to my mother, say that was shut down immediately, sometimes physically, usually verbally, and threatened, and like emotional warfare, if you will, right? And so shutting down those experiences creates wounds that we carry, that we often don't look at for a long time until we become parents, and our kids have those same behaviors, and then we try to shut them down. Right. And so it's like we're upset with both our kids and ourselves at the same time for experiencing this.
And in the case of talking back, right? That's a term you don't really hear anymore, but you certainly heard it when we were being raised, right? It's not a thing you hold kids to anymore, except unless you were raised. I'll speak for myself. If you were raised not being able to talk back, right? If that was not a thing that could happen in your household, and then your kid does do it because I guess they feel safe and secure in your love, and they talk back, and we live in an age where that's sort of, we're framing it differently, but our lizard brain is like, whoa, 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 that's not okay because it was never okay for me.
Yeah. So my mom's term was sassy. She's like, don't you be sassy. And that she could say that with a straight face is really funny, right? Like, you're being sassy. And now I'm like a gay man, and I'm like, yes, girl, I'm sassy, right?
Net positive.
So, right. Like, there's no negative association with sass, right? But there is still that feeling, if I am not calm, cool, and collected, right? Which the stress of the Chrome update, just saying that sounds funny to me, right? But the stress of that and the urgency and the time and having that additional thing, I was like, I have to shut that down. Right. Because, and so there wasn't enough composure for me to recognize when I was getting dysregulated, to re-regulate, and then do all the things that I could have done to calm that situation down without threatening the cancellation, the universal cancellation.
Not going
Christmas.
Nuclear.
Right. And so that is a huge thing that I notice in the parents that I work with, is that most of us were raised, so that we were raised in a certain way, and most of us have cultural wisdom and family wisdom that we want to bring to our families, right? And so that may be Christmas traditions, it may be a faith tradition, it may be service, it might be cousins as your first best friends, right? So for my family, some Sunday suppers were everything. We're a queer family, so we change it to brunch. And so like all of these traditions come, but we also have wounds, right? We have things that maybe were trauma, or maybe we're just uncomfortable and we want to interrupt them. So a classic one is, I was raised so that I didn't have a lot of room to talk back, as we say to our parents. I also had tons of freedom outside the house to express, right? And my kids, I want them to self-advocate, to negotiate, to express their feelings, to hold boundaries, right? And if they're going to do that, they need to have space to practice with me. And so I try to build the skills that they can do that in a calm, thoughtful way versus throwing a turtle. But sometimes when you're 6, that's the best way you can express yourself. And so for me to be calm and collected in that moment, then I can meet his needs. I see that you're upset. I see that you need something. It's not okay to throw something. So you let me know when you're ready, and then we can talk about what you're upset about, and we can figure out if there's something to do about it. But I'm not going to engage with you while you're going to throw something at me, right? Very different than canceling Christmas.
Right. So those are the two things you could try. I know which one is probably ideally better.
Yes. But with all parents, as you say, laughing in the face of motherhood, like, we have to laugh at the fails, right? Like, we are going to have a ton of them. And so, like, let's celebrate and laugh at the fails.
So when you started looking at parenting coaching,
Hmm.
you came to it.
Hmm.
You came to it as like I need an approach, right, with your own children, as so many of us do. Like, oh, I need
Yeah.
help around this, and then we become
Yeah.
experts in the thing that we most needed to learn.
Yes.
And one of the things you discovered along the way, having read this on your website, is that there was a lack of diverse cultures and traditions represented
Yeah.
in the sort of
Yeah.
parenting advice that you were seeing.
Yeah. So what happened, which is by no means unique to my family. So I will say my husband and I adopted 2 kids from foster care, and they are biological half brothers. We got them both as infants. They're 6 years apart. The first one was planned. The second one, we got a call, and they said, we have this baby boy, 6 weeks old. And I said, why are you calling me? And the social worker said, oh, I forgot to say, he's your older son's biological brother. And so, like, I screamed. And 4 days later, we had a baby move
Oh my
in.
gosh.
And so we had an unplanned gay pregnancy. Which is how I described it to my boss. So that's how we created our family. And um, like many families, when we went into pandemic shutdown,
Yes.
right? I know some families like had more time to be together and things slowed down and there was connection and games. And that was not our story,
Right. Mine, not
right?
mine either. Yeah.
And so we went into what fresh hell. And the darkest part of that is that my older kiddo had a very intense mental health breakdown. And what I think that was related to is the disconnection from community, attempts at virtual learning when he has learning challenges, which are fine in a regular classroom, but virtual learning was never going to serve ADHD and
Yes.
dyslexia, right?
Right.
And then also, like, he has wounds that were gonna pop at some point. And so the pandemic was like the kettle, the oil, and the heat, right?
Yes.
For his popcorn. And so that happened, and it got really, really intense. And his outbursts would show up as intense aggression and screaming, breaking holes in the walls, threatening us, throwing things at us, and they would last like 2 hours. And the good news is that we got him all kinds of amazing support. I realize I'm doing something. My older kiddo is shifting to they, them pronouns,
Okay.
which I'm in the process of, not like emotionally fine with it, just adapting to the
Right. Literally
language.
adapting to it.
But yeah, also, they're such a dude in how they present, right? So I'm like, I don't see the non-binariness, but that's my stuff.
Yes.
And so I will adapt. So we got great support for them, and they're thriving now. Different school, different context, doing amazing. And I knew that I needed support for myself, and I couldn't find support that worked for me. And what that looked like was I went out and found parenting resources, parenting coaches, and there were also social workers and counselors involved in the whole thing. And first of all, so we're my husband and I are Filipino, and everyone we engaged with was white.
Mm-hmm.
And they came across as very didactic, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to do these things. And what we're going to do is take away all of your tools that you know how to do, which I understand now many of them are ineffective and problematic, right? But you cannot threaten, you cannot punish, you cannot do timeouts, you cannot scream. And so when your kid is having a 2-hour fit about you asking them to brush their teeth, you need to show up in a loving, solid, calm way. And I'm like, what you don't understand is that I have generations of ancestors and my actual mother on the phone saying, beat him down,
Right.
right? Like,
Shut
he
that
is
down.
acting up, he's testing your authority. You must hold strong, you must shut that down. Right. And so I got into power struggles with them all the time. And we are both very stubborn and we're both very temperamental. And so we've had these vicious power struggles. And I knew that I was making their situation worse. I knew that I was screaming and threatening and punishing a mental health issue, and that was making it worse.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to stop in the moment because I was so triggered and I didn't have tools and skills.
And
And
P.S.
so
it's very hard, right? P.S.
it's
It's
hard.
incredibly difficult. Just to
It is
just to give you
hard.
some grace. It's
Right.
extremely
Thank you.
difficult.
Thanks so much. If the Chrome update was enough stress, right, to make me lose it in that moment,
Right.
imagine this
And you're stuck
this
in it's a
situation.
pandemic and this, and you're
Yes.
isolated, and yes,
Yes.
it's the kettle for a parent as well.
Yes. Thank you for that, Grace. And so I went out to find support, and I couldn't find a parenting coach that was of color and culturally grounded and understood my history and also was willing to deal with my trauma, because that's really what we had to do, is understand that it wasn't just about tools, but looking at my wounds so I could do the hardest thing that there is in parenting, which is to stay calm when your kid is not.
I saw
Right?
that on your website. I'm like, whoops, circling that. The hardest thing about
Yes.
parenting is to stay
Yes.
calm when your child is not. Yes, that's
Yes.
right. That's true.
And so I went out and did research, and I researched in psychology, in culturally grounded practices around parenting, in developing community. And what I found is ways that I could learn at first to not react for 1 second, and then expanding that to 5 seconds. And what I found is if you can get to 5 seconds, you can do everything and anything.
Wow.
Right? Because in that 5-second pause, you can access all your tools. You can realize where you're going. You can take a walk. You can say to your kid, I need to disengage. Right? You can tell your partner, if you're partnered, I need you to tap in. Right? There's all these things. But if you can't hold that long, you're going to go to your default responses.
Yes.
And then I was able to construct tools that worked for myself that felt both culturally grounded and respectful to my child and effective. Right? And I didn't invent all of this stuff. Right? Like, this was pulling things together and creating my own framework. And so we really started to heal and get better as a family. It's still dang hard, right? So don't get me wrong, but we started to do so much better. And then there was a point where I thought, I bet I'm not the only person who is on this journey. I bet I'm not the only person who is looking for support, but wants it in a culturally grounded way that is done in community and feels respected and is trauma informed. And what I've found is that there are other folks who are looking for this. And so now my work is with parents and also educators around supporting like big energy, big feeling kids who are prone to outbursts, and how we hold our own sense of calm, but also boundaries in those moments.
Noticed that right away when I went to Village Well, which is your website, your community.
Village Well Parenting.
Village Well Parenting.
Yep.
But it does have, when you go there, it's immediately, are you an educator or are you a parent or a child raiser? And that's so interesting that the tools that are available here really are useful for anybody who spends a lot of their time with children in either capacity.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that I do that is I love working with schools because I can support educators in behavior management, in connecting with their kids, in understanding their big energy, impulsive kids. But then I can also offer services to the parents, because one of the things that's so challenging for schools is, let's say Johnny's acting up. Right. And you call the parent and say, Johnny's acting up. And then the parent says, well, Johnny's acting up at home too. Well, what should I do?
Right.
And the school says, I don't know. Right. And so this way we actually have positive resources for the parents to be able to say, like, it looks like Johnny is acting out because they are frustrated around these things, or these are the things that trigger them, or maybe there's the possibility of ADHD or whatever. And so we can provide the resources for how parents can support at home and teachers can support at school.
It seems to me like it's a new way to address sort of classroom needs because, again, going back to how it used to be, I mean, the way I went to school was 30 kids in a classroom, hands folded on their desks and silent at all times. And if you weren't, you were sent to the principal's office. And I think we all spent a lot more time, trying to like sit up straight than we did learning sometimes. But it was probably easier for the teacher. And now
Yes,
we
yes.
want kids, and now they're let me underline, like, it's good. It's good for learning differences to be perceived as such instead of problem kids, right? It's good that kids get to express joy in the classroom instead of sitting up straight and folding their hands. Um, but I think sometimes a teacher is like, "Look, I have one kid that's taking 50% of my energy. How do I help the other kids in the class?"
Exactly. So what I would argue is that while we don't do the sit in your chair, sit up straight, eyes forward on the blackboard, well, that's not the primary model. Now it's students engage with each other in groups, engage with the teacher
Uh,
expression, but here are the boundaries of behavior that are required for that. And if you go outside of those boundaries, then you're problematic to the teacher and the class. And so there are still major restrictions, especially because of group management, right? It's hard. And so when you have a student that is has low frustration tolerance and big outbursts, or has trauma that results in them getting into fights or crying or perfectionism, all of these things are perceived as challenges for the teacher and school, and they are. And
mhm.
so, how do we actually minimize those behaviors by understanding what the needs of the students are, and then providing teachers and parents with resources to support those students?
You talked about something on your Instagram page that I thought
Mm-hmm.
was really it hit the nail on the head. M&M parenting, and I thought, oh, I know what that is. I never knew they had a
Thank
name, but
you
I know
for
what that
bringing
is.
that up.
So tell us what
Um,
M&M parenting is.
Yes. So like I was so proud that I coined that term. I feel so
I like it.
so
I approve.
self-satisfied. Yeah. So I was working at my last in-person job, and there were free M&Ms in the break room, right, in the lunchroom. And every day I would tell myself, I'm not going to have any M&Ms because they take me on a sugar high and crash, and they are not aligned with my nutritional focus right now, right? And then every day at around 3 or 3:30, I would walk past them and I would break and I would devour handfuls of these M&Ms, right? And so I was sabotaging my long-term goals for the quick fix, right? And M&Ms aren't even that good. Sorry, Mars or whoever
They're not
owns
a sponsor of
M&Ms.
this episode. Yeah.
Yes, they like, it's not good chocolate, right? And so, but still, I would devour them. And so, M&M parenting is when we do the thing in the immediate moment that will solve a situation or placate a situation in the short term that is not good for the long term needs of our kids,
Mm.
right? And so, if we give our kids our phones every time we go to a restaurant so that we can have adult conversation, our kids are not going to learn how to focus and have conversation at dinner. I'm not saying never do it,
Right.
right? But if that's our constant practice, then how do our kids learn to engage with people over dinner? Another one is if so one, never take your kids to Target. Target is a death trap, right?
Right.
But sorry, Target, hope you're not a sponsor of this episode. Don't take
The
your kids
lights,
to
the
Target.
sound, the toys, right? It's a
Yes,
stimulating
yes,
environment
yes.
for
And
parents
so
too.
there's inevitably a battle for, can I have that thing? And you can give in and placate your child, but also it's giving your child the sense that they can get anything they want at any given time, which
Mhm.
does not serve the long-term development of your kid,
Mhm.
right? Um, a quick one is your kid wants a snack 15 minutes before dinner. Never, never give in to that. It's going to sabotage your dinner,
Right.
right? Unless it's the vegetables that you're going to serve for
Right,
dinner,
right,
right?
right.
Like, you can offer some broccoli beforehand, go for it. But don't give your kid chips before dinner. So that's M&M Parenting.
So, Ed, something that Village Well Parenting acknowledges as part of its work that was really illuminating to me was that the sources of our cultural wisdom that we
Mm-hmm.
all bring to our parenting, our lived experiences, and the generational trauma that might be also impacting our parenting can come from the same place, the same source.
They
It can,
always come from the same place.
right? It's the same
Yeah.
place. And so, how do
Yeah.
you start to investigate that?
Yeah. And ain't that a bizatch? When you have to like untie that and
Yeah.
unpack. So, yeah. And so let me see if I can do this as a story quickly. So my grandparents came from the Philippines to Hawaii in the early 1900s to work the pineapple plantations in Hawaii. So my family's big on pineapple. I'm a pineapple expert. I am anti putting a ring of pineapple on a burger and calling it a Maui burger. Um, and but that's where my history comes from. The I have gained so much wisdom from my Filipino family about the closeness of family, about loyalty, about connection. And there's this word that my Filipino dialect uses, antos, which is about endure, resilience, keep fighting on, right? And that word was used often for taught to my generation, the third generation, as about like you come from strong stock, you can do this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And over time, what I learned is that our family has a shadow story that we don't talk about much, although I'm about to, which is that my grandmother was a child bride at 14 and that she didn't have agency in who she married. And she had 10 kids. And the life in the pineapple plantation was very dangerous. So my grandfather participated in strikes, and those strikes were often broken up by goons, right? Physically broken up. And on payday, they used to hide with the women and children in the fields. The men standing guards in the cane fields, the men standing guards with their knives because they were worried about bachelors from the neighboring camp coming over to cowboy the women, right? And I was an adult when I figured out what cowboy meant. And so all of this love that I received from my family through generations is real. And there was also this violence and this fear of violence um, that seeped into our family culture and practices as well.
Wow.
And so my grandparents were very loving. They were also very violent with their children and very strict. And I can see how in their fight flight, right, constant vigilance, that they felt that they had to do that, but also that those practices were passed on so that everyone on that side of the family gets triggered so easily, gets angry so easily, gets offended if somebody, if a waiter fails to serve them correctly. That's not true for everybody, but that's a common characteristic. Like, I feel so dissed by the situation. And I'm like, y'all, that's our trauma response.
Oh,
And Antos can mean be strong and be resilient. And it can also mean suffer and endure and don't complain about your lot in life. And so these are the things that I try to detangle and bring one side of Antos forward, because I am strong and I want my kids to be strong, but I don't want to feel like I have to carry a burden of suffering. And I definitely don't want to pass that on to my kids.
yeah.
And so when we talk sometimes about decolonizing parenting in the Village Well, and so all of my grandparents' story is shaped by a history of colonization, right? Of how Hawaii was taken over, of how labor was extracted from the Philippines and brought to Hawaii so that American businesses could flourish, and the violent practices that were allowed in that community at the time seeped into our family practices, right? And when I say this, it's conflicting for me because I obviously have an anti colonization bent. And I think what happened with the takeover of Hawaii and, cheap labor was problematic. It also created my family. And I grew up in Hawaii, and I love being from Hawaii and what that means and the culture I gained from it. So it's very conflicting. And so the questions of how we decolonize is really, to me, about figuring out how to lean into the wisdom and start to understand the wounds.
So tell us about Village Well Parenting and the different ways that parents can begin to learn from you and do this work.
Yeah. So I do one-on-one coaching, or mostly one with families coaching. And so that's part of what I do. I also think that for many people, and specifically folks of color, is that we're used to engaging in our healing processes in community, right? So in groups of people, where we support each other, where we laugh at our failures, where we connect about our triumphs, where we support each other, where we cry together. And so I try to do more work in groups around specific topics. So say my toddler is driving me bonkers, workshops around teens and screens, things like that. So where we come together over the course of time. For listeners, if you want to hang out with me, even after hearing all my failures, the best way to do that is we have a free First Friday session at 12 Pacific, noon Pacific, every first Friday of the month. It's super chill. It's fun. I give a little parenting tool. So I may talk about nudging your kids to eat more nutritional food. And I talk about that for like 10 minutes, and then we just open it up to talk about whatever. And it's a great space to hang out together. And you can sign up for that in the links. And so that's a great way. And then also you can follow my socials. Should I say that now, or should
Sure.
I
Go ahead.
wait?
Say them. Yeah.
Okay. You can follow my socials, Instagram and Facebook at Village Well Parenting, and TikTok at Queer Brown Dad.
I love how Village Well Parenting, how every family can find themselves represented there, right? Like parents, child raisers, LGBTQ families, adoptive families. And then when we walk into it, it is the same work. It is like getting your picky eater to eat something. It is getting your toddler to stop
Yes.
driving you crazy, right? We're all doing
Yes.
that work, even if
Yes.
our families don't look
It's
like one
getting
another.
your mother's voice out of your head,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Unless it's when you want your mother's voice in your head. But I will say this, so much of the parenting coaching out there makes assumptions, and parenting like counsel makes assumptions that it's not aware it's making,
Yeah.
right? So
I've done it.
example,
I'm aware of it now. You
totally.
learn.
And I do it too, right? Because I'm living a relatively middle class life, right? And so things like my kids can get up anytime they want, but they're not allowed to come downstairs till 7 because that's my me time before 7. I'm like, there are many assumptions in that. And like, no shade on you, but if you don't understand the assumptions, then that becomes problematic. And especially that's true when I work with, because I do a lot of work contracted with government organizations and schools. And so I'm working with parents who have less means. And so it's really important to pull in the different cultural aspects, but also understand that those parents are facing stressors that are different from the ones that even I am facing.
Right. I really love this conversation, Ed. I think you are a delight, and I think the work you're doing is so important. And I know that anybody listening to this today will be really excited to check everything out at Village Well Parenting.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've been really enjoying listening to your podcast, so I'm kind of fangirling right now being here.
Thank you so much, Ed.
All right, be well.